Dr. Theo Acheampong, you have seen what has happened so far in the course of this week, and the deadline is just by the corner. Is it 2 days or 3? Then we are done. So what do you say? Good success for the bankers, insurers, and the securities, but the individual bondholders, what do you say? Do you suspect they will get anything? Because the government has not officially also stated its position on what will happen to them.
Good morning, and I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Very clearly.
I think we need to acknowledge the fact, rightfully, that some good progress has been made on the whole domestic debt exchange program. And like Senya was saying, you have 3 of the important stakeholder groups now agreeing through their associations to be a part of that process with, revised terms that the government is offering to them. So specifically, we have, like you mentioned, the securities agency, we have the banks, we have the insurance companies, of course, there's the central bank and the like in the collectively, when you add all of them up, it is possible to actually get about 65-70% participation in the program. And what that then means is that you don't necessarily actually need the individual bondholders for this to become a success in that regard. Again, let me just reiterate Senyor's point here. With the institutions, they have fail-safe or safeguard measures that they can fall back on. We're talking about the stability fund, and we're talking about other changes to the way they report their capital requirements, etc. So there's some sort of incentive in there that allows them to partially mitigate the effect of the restructuring, exercise. But with the individual bondholders, it becomes quite tricky because they don't have anything like that. And the consequence of, them participating in this exercise, even under the revised or restructured terms, on the wider economy is going to be actually quite that. So I think that it's still possible to actually conclude this exercise with the institutions and not include the individual bondholders, just like the government actually offered at the very beginning of this exercise. And there's an interesting statement or quote in what the government said with the insurance, the Securities Industry Association in the press release from yesterday. The 2B of the statement talks about, quote, the collective investment schemes and individuals who hold bonds in trust accounts with the Securities and Exchange Commission approved firms would be offered any enhanced commercial terms agreed with, or, and this is the important part, exemptions granted to individual bondholders. So I think it's very much possible that in the next 2 or 3 days before the exercise ends, we might maybe see a statement coming through that the individual bondholders perhaps are exempted, and those other individuals who have their investments in these collective investment schemes would also be partially or fully exempted. That then would ensure that, for me, the process is fair and there's a sense of burden sharing. But at the moment, yes, good progress has been made, and it is possible to conclude this exercise with the institutional players and not necessarily include the individual bondholders, because the socioeconomic consequences of that would actually be quite dire if we were to move that trajectory.
Right. And you find the proposals by the committee that was set, the technical committee that was set up, the proposals on the side of the individual bondholders, you find them reasonable and something that the ministry must adopt?
These are the same things that we've been talking about for the last, 3-4 years, about the fact that you need to live within your means on the expenditure side, but of course you need to raise additional revenue as well. So, I mean, they did a good piece of work by bringing on the table in excess of 83 billion Ghana cedis of potential, revenue or savings that can be made. And it's actually quite an important point here. Let it not, or the impression has been created as though it is just a domestic or a debt exchange program. We need to address what actually led us to this point in the first instance, which is that we have been living recklessly, we've been living beyond our means, and to an extent, we have mismanaged some of the economic gains that we made a few years ago. Classic example being just the COVID, the Auditor General's report into the COVID funds.
Right.
You can see the wastage within the system. Those are the big issues that we need to tackle. And so the IBF is very much on point in highlighting where we can make savings and in highlighting the fact that this conversation goes beyond just debt restructuring. It's a bigger issue of economic governance.
Right. I've heard it suggestions that it may take a whole generation to correct the problem with the financial sector after this program. Coming from where we are coming from, the DKMs or whatever, the men's gold, the bank and financial institutions collapse, and then suddenly now the most trusted source of investment also is suffering this. But the suggestion by the Catholic Bishops' Conference, they say, whilst they require everything, they ask all of us to, as it were, appreciate the current economic situation and understand that there will be difficulties in the coming month. There are those who suggest that we must be part of this. It's already come on us. So we must be willing to let go of something. Shouldn't the individual bondholders, and I think I'm one of them, do I think, in fact I am, shouldn't they be thinking that something must give from their end as well?
Yeah, but something must give. They're already giving away in terms of the inflation that they're suffering, right? Or actually, Ghanaians are collectively, suffering. We're talking 50% inflation currently. So already, the money that you have doesn't go that far. We're talking about, hikes in the cost of goods and services across the board. So for me, I don't think necessarily that something must give translates into further impoverishing Ghanaians. I strongly disagree with that view, especially when you're not offering any other alternative, right, to them on the table. And as they have shown, and as those of us in civil society have shown, the biggest problem in the room here is not Ghanaians. The biggest problem in the room is the Ghanaian government, which has led us down this pathway of now having to comprehensively restructure the country's debt. And it is very possible for the government to cut part of its expenditure and to raise other revenue without burdening Ghanaians further and without further sort of impoverishing Ghanaians and creating more inequality and inequity in the system. So I think we are already doing our bit as citizens in sharing the burdens. And I don't think there's any more that we can do much further beyond just being good citizens, maybe paying our taxes. But the biggest problem, I repeat again, is the government. And that's where we must start from.
My final question to you will be this. I want you to help us get a certain perspective. Bishop Charles Agyinasare, for example, was preaching to his congregants and disclosed that he has some 106,000 cedis in an institution, and he sought to withdraw the money. And he was told that he cannot withdraw the money, what they can do for him. And it's a favor to him because he is, if you like it, a VVIP. I mean, there's no question about that. So he can get 1,000 cedis of his investment each week until the debt is fully financed. That means it's going to take him how many months? 106,000 Ghana cedis. How does this happen?
Yeah, it happens because there's no liquidity within the system. So remember that if you go and give your money to a bank or an investment association, basically they don't keep all of the money with them. They have to invest that money and generate a return in order to be able to repay you back. And in an environment where there's a lot of fear and anxiety, a lot of people then tend to want to cash out of those investments. Normally, the industry ratio, I think it's about probably only about 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 may walk in to demand their investment. But if you have more than that, sometimes half walking in, there's no way you'll be able to provide that money back to them because you need to exit those investments to actually create the liquidity that is required. So basically, that's what's happening. That it is not as though the money isn't there, but the monies are locked up in the investments that these firms have made. So it's going to be difficult for any of the firms to be able to honor the payment obligations that are required for you. And part of the reason why that is the case is because of the whole fear of the restructuring exercise and the anxiety that has
All right.
created for a lot of investors.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Acheampong, political risk analyst and economist. Now,